Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the very first session of the Investment Readiness Accelerator series for African startups, proudly brought to you by Oluwole Consults and GrantsDatabase.org. GrantsDatabase is a global platform for grants and opportunities in several industries. My name is Oluwole Omojofodun, and I'll be your host today. And also, we are going to be doing this together. Our mission with this series is simple, is to help Africa founders like you to become investment ready, to help you become investment ready. Now, so you can stop wasting time searching the wrong funding paths and start building a sustainable, fundable businesses. Now, each month, we're going to be delving into one crucial aspect of investment readiness, and you are going to be hearing insights, real life startup stories, practical tips, and life opportunities from Grand Database, right? Opportunities. Most importantly, this is not just about theory, right? It's about equipping you to take immediate action in your own startup, right? To help you take immediate action in your own startup. Now, today's topic is one of that is one that every founder struggles with at some point in their business. We're going to be talking about grants, we're going to be talking about equity, and we're going to be talking about debt. So, the essence of all of this is for you to know how to pick the right funding path for your startup, right? So that is what I'm going to be looking at. So too many startups fail not because the idea was bad, right? They fail because they went after the wrong kind of funding, right? They went after the right the wrong kind of funding. Trying imagine trying to raise a VC equity for a small community bakery or taking out bank loans, right? Before you have a steady revenue. It's a recipe for frustration and for failure, right? So I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the three funding parts that we're going to be talking about. We're talking about grants, we're talking about equity, and we're also talking about loans, right? So the first one here is grants. So grants are non-repayable funds, usually from donors, right? Grants are non-repayable funds, usually from donors, from NGOs, from governments or foundations. They are fantastic for early validation and social impact-driven projects. So grants are fantastic for early validation and social impact-driven projects. Now let's look at some pros of grants. I said grants are non-repayable funds, so they are money that you are not paying back, unlike loan and no much obligation. And they are funds from donors. If you have a donor that want to give a certain amount of money to do a particular project from NGOs, from government or foundations. So now let's look at some pros. Number one advantage or pros of grants is that they are non-dilutive. So this means that you don't give away equity. Now equity means the part of the business. In your business, you own, let's say, 100% of it. So in grants, you are not giving away equity. You retain all the equity, all the percentage, all the ownership of your business, of your startup. So the second pros of grants is that they are great for pilot, research, and impact projects. So if you have an idea, you want to have a pilot of it, a pilot session, you want to research a particular stuff, or you have an impact project for non-profits or NGOs, right? So grants are very, very good for that. The third pros of grants is that it helps to build credibility for future funding. So grant helps to build credibility that you've managed so amount of funding before, either it's a grant, it helps to build that credibility that, oh, you've been able to do something and you can do something if invested in, right? So now let's look at some cons of grants. In other words, some disadvantage. Number one, it is that it is highly competitive. If MasterCard Foundation or the British Council is making a call for application for, let's say, on agricultural product or project, right? So thousands of applications that they are going to receive, right? So on that same call for application, you have lots of organizations that are going to apply for that. So that makes it very, very competitive. You can have thousands of applications just on $50,000 that they want to give out. So the competition for grant is highly, highly competitive, up there, right? Now, another cons of grant is that it's often tied to donors' priorities. Grants are often tied to donors' priorities, not your growth roadmap. Now, your startup, you have a growth roadmap, but grants are not tied to your own. They are not tied to your own growth roadmap. They are tied uh, to the founders priority. So the donors have their priority. They have some of the things they want to get, and that is what they want you to get also with them. They have an end product, something they are looking forward to, and that is exactly what they want you to do everything you want to do in that regard. So lastly, usually it's in short term and not scalable long term. So grants is not for the long term, right? It's a short term stuff, something that you get in the meantime, right? While you are developing or building your startup. So those are some of the cons of grants. All right. Yes. I'm having some questions here coming already, but we're going to take it. So an example here is a Nigerian agri-tech startup got a $50,000 USA grant, to pilot solar cold storage. Now, this grant helped them to improve their model, but when it came to expansion, grants were not enough. They had to pivot to equity and to debt. So grant is not enough to expand a business, to expand your startup, right? Pivoting to equity investment and loan. So the key takeaway about grants is that grants are best for early stage, impact focused or high risk innovation pilots. So they are not a long-term fuel for scaling, not a long-term fuel for scaling your startup. So the second one here is the equity. Now, equity is when you sell a piece of your company to investors. So when you give a piece, you have 100% before, and you are giving away 20% for $100,000 or $50,000, or you are giving any amount away. So that is what equity is. So investors could be angel investors, they could be venture capitalists, VCs, or they could be accelerators. There are some accelerators that for you to be accepted into, one of the conditions would be that, okay, if they're investing in your business, they can have like 2%, they can have like 6% or 5% of your business, right? So those are some of the stuff regarding equity, right? In exchange for capital, you are exchanging a percentage of the business and ownership for the business for money, capital. So some of the pros of equity is that number one is that it's big funding potential for scale. Now you see a lot of I think around this year, earlier this year, from late last year to this year, you see a lot of Nigerian businesses raising funds, raising a lot of money. We have money points with Google and some other VC firms raising a lot of money that makes money point to rise about 1 billion to be a unicorn, right? So that is equity investment, right? It's a big potential for scale. Another one, the second one is that investors bring networks, expertise, and credibility. So if you are a fan of Shark Tank, one of my favorite shows, or the Lions Den in Nigeria, or the Dragons Den, mostly in the UK. So you see that people are going to come to that place to pitch their business at the end of the day for a change of capital, right? And then you will see some of those investors that are lined up. So they are talking about what they are bringing on board. So they are not just giving you money. They are bringing network. They are bringing expertise. They are bringing credibility to your business, right? So that is one of the things that equity also brings along. The third thing about equity is that it is flexible. So you don't pay monthly. That is the third thing about equity, is that it is very, very flexible. You pay it, it's not something that is. So let's talk about the cons of grants. The cons of grants no, I mean the cons of equity rather. The cons of equity. Now, the first thing is that in equity you give up ownership and decision making power. Unlike grants, whereby you retain the full ownership of the startup, but when you are looking for equity, you give a percentage, you give ownership, right? You give ownership and decision making power. Before, it used to be only you person, only you one making all the decision. But when other investors are coming, they are having ownership of, they are having part of the ownership of the business. So the decision will have to be split, right? If you are going to be making something strategic or a decision regarding the business, you have to consult with them. You have to know their thoughts. You have to carry them along, right? So that is one of the cons. The other thing about equity is that the fundraising takes months of due diligence. Now, if a VC firm is trying to invest in your business, so they're going to verify your claims, they're going to go through your records, they're going to take a lot of legal processes. Those processes can be very, very cumbersome, right? So they're going to do all of this to ascertain that you have what you say you have, right? So that is one of the things. And the other aspect of equity you should know is that it's not suitable for businesses without high growth potential. So if you are having a business or an idea that is not a high growth potential, it can't grow exponentially, then equity is not for you, right? Because you are going to suffer for it. The business is going to be affected with it. Example here in Nigeria, we have Flutterwave. Flutterwave started with equity funding, right? And raising early capital from investors who believed in their growth potential. Now, they diluted ownership, yes, but they also unlocked the scale to become a unicorn. Like I mentioned earlier, a unicorn is a startup that is valued at $1 billion. So that is what a unicorn is. Now, the key takeaway about equity is that equity works for high growth, tech enabled, or scalable ventures. Equity, let me take that again. It works for high growth, number one, tech enabled, or scalable ventures. If you read the book Zero to One by Peter Thiel, you see how he talks about innovation. You see about how he talks about growth. You see how he mentioned exponential growth. And most of these growth are as a result of tech enabled. It can be adopted in several places at a very fast pace, right? So that is that is one of the things about equity you should know. So let's go to the third one. The third aspect of funding is the debt. Now, debt is borrowed money. It could be bank loans, it could be venture debt, it could be credit facilities, right? Loan and debt is borrowed money. Can call it loan, right, or whatever. So it could be bank, it could be venture debt, it could be credit facility. You don't give away equity in loan, but you must repay with interest. You can take a loan of $10,000 or $50,000, or let's say 10 million naira, for example. You are paying back at an interest of 10% or 9% per annum, right? So that is what debt is. Now, the good things about debt is that no loss of ownership. If you are going to a bank to take a debt, you are not losing ownership. They are not interested in taking equity from your business, right? And another thing about debt is that predictable if revenue is steady. It is very, very predictable if you have a steady revenue. And another thing that is good about debt is that it scales well for asset heavy or recurring revenue businesses. So if you have a heavy asset, then or a recurring revenue businesses, then debt is very good form of financing. Now, one of the things you should know about debt that I'm not that should the cons of it, let me call it that way, is that it requires collateral or proving cash flow. Now, banks are interested in their interest. So creditors are interested in their interest. So one of the things you know is that loan of debt requires collateral. You have to bring something that will stand in place in case that you are not able to pay back the money or the capital rather. So another thing you should know is that it is risky if revenue is unpredictable. If you don't have a predictable revenue that on a bad day, on a bad month, so amount is coming into your business and you are taking a loan, it is a very risky thing to do. And thirdly, interest burdens can cripple early startups. Imagine a startup that you are building a startup, you don't know what it could turn out to be. It could grow, it could fail, a lot of things could happen that are not even within your power, right? So interest burden can cripple early startups. So a typical example is if you look at in Kenya, we have Mkopa. Even in Nigeria here, we have Delight Solar, we have Sun King. So all of these use pay-as-you-go solar. So they thrive on debt financing because of what? Because their customer repayment strategy are predictable. So that means that if you're using a Delight or Sun King product, it is very sure that you're going to make payment for you to be able to use the product, right? So the key takeaway about debt is that debt suits SMEs and startups with stable revenue streams or asset-backed operations. That is the type of SMEs that are suitable for debt. So now, let's wrap up all of these things that we've talked about. Let's wrap them up. We've talked about grant, we've talked about equity, we've talked about what again? Debt. Okay. Now here is a simple framework to remember all of these three things we've talked about. Grant is best for early pilots, social impacts, and innovation projects. And equity is best for growth, high growth, not just growth, but high growth, scalable startups, especially in tech. You see that a speciality is also there. And then debt is best for revenue generating SMEs. SMEs means small and medium enterprises or businesses with stable cash flow. If you don't have stable cash flow, you may consider some other form of funding, right? Now, the trick of all of these things, of all these three types of funding, is for you to match your stage, business model, and growth and trajectory to the right type of funding. Now, the essence of all of these things that we are talking about is for you to know that, okay, these are the three types of funding that you have for your startup. So, and then you are able to match your stage of your business, and then you are able to match your business model, you're able to match your growth trajectory to the right type of funding, as we've talked about, that is required for your startup. Now, yes, so those are some of the things. I'm going to be taking questions. That are some of the questions that are here right now, and we're going to spend some time in answering some of the questions that are here, so that we can be able to round up. Okay. Okay, so the first question here is, all right, the first question here is, how do I know if my startup is ready for equity investment? This is a question coming from the chat here. Okay, how do I know if my startup is ready for equity investment? Very good. Now, you are ready for equity investment if your startup has three things. You are ready for equity investment if your startup has three things. Number one, a scalable model. A scalable model. Example, a tech-enabled platform, a technology-enabled platform, not just a single location shop. Now, this is something that I learned from Zero to One, Peter Thiel, and not only him, a lot of other founders that have built big businesses talk about scalable model. And one of the things about scalable model is it grow exponentially with tech. Now, if you have a shop, just one shop, the growth of that shop is dependent on a lot of things. The way it will grow cannot be compared with how a tech will grow, that before you know it grows exponentially, millions of people are using it. They are serving billions, millions of people across the world, right? You are ready for equity investment. Number two, if you have a market fraction. Now, market fraction here, we are talking about users. We are talking about users are people that are using your product. Either they are paying you or they are not paying you. Either they are using it for free or they are using it for pay, but people are using it. That is why today you see a lot of businesses, especially tech, that they want people to use their, just come here and use it, right? So you are ready for equity investment if you have interaction, either users or you have revenue or adoption, even if the product is not yet profitable, right? So you are ready for equity investment if you have market traction. Thirdly, you are ready for equity investment if you have a clear growth plan that produce 10x returns for investors. Now, investors are not coming because they want returns on their investment. There's nobody that does not want return on their investment. So investors want returns on their investment. So if your startup has a clear growth plan that can produce 10x returns for investors, yes, you are ready for equity investment. So example here, let me give a very clear example is Flutterwave. Flutterwave in Nigeria is popular in Africa. So Flutterwave did not raise equity at idea stage, right? What they did is they had traction at the idea stage and then a growth model before attracting venture capitalists. So they have traction, people are using their products, a lot of people are using it, and then those traction, they have users, they have revenue, even if it is small and it's tech enabled, it's very usable, and then they have clear growth to provide 10x for investors. So if you are still a pre-revenue or you are proving concept, focus on grants or bootstrapping first. Now, bootstrapping is when you source for the money yourself, like you're saving, you get money from family and friends. So that is bootstrapping. You are trying to run it yourself, right? So another question here is, can I combine grants, equity, and debt in one funding journey? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So many successful startups actually have done that before. It's called a funding mix. It's called a funding mix. So you can start with grants for pilots and validation, and then move to equity when you are ready to scale rapidly when you are ready to scale rapidly, and debt once you have a stable revenue to finance working capital or assets. Like we've talked about all of these three aspects of funding. We've talked about all of them. So starting with that, grants for pilot and validation, equity for scaling rapidly, and then debt once you have a stable revenue, right? So that is how to get that one done. Another question here is, why do some Africa funders make complain that grants make them dependent? Why do some Africa funders complain that grants make them dependent? Okay. Now, grants can create a dependency trap. It can create a dependency trap if funders only chase donor money, right, and never build revenue. So donor prioritizes shift, and your sustainability should not depend on them. So it will be dependent if you only chase after the money, as free money, as donor money. So you use grant for early stage experiments and impact pilots, but also design a path to revenue or blended finance. Yes. Another question here is, what do investors mean when they say my startup is not investable? Okay. What do investors mean when they say my startup is not investable? Now, when an investor tells you that your startup is not investable, it means four things. Number one, it could mean no clear business model. You don't have a clear business model. Now, what is the business model? Is how do you make money in the business? Is not clear. To you, you might be speaking English like this or that, but the process is not clear to them. So investors can tell you that your business is not investable when they do not see a clear business model in it. Another reason why investors can tell you your business is not investable is that it is weak, or you have a weak or unrealistic financials. Your financials are very weak, or they are not realistic. You understand? Yeah, they are not realistic. Another one is you don't have traction, no customers, no users, no pilots, no revenue, nothing. So these are some of the reasons why an investor will tell you that your business is not, or your startup is not investable. Another one is the fourth reason is team lacks execution capacity. Now, if these four things, investors look at them. They look at your business model, they look at your finance, they look at your traction to see if you have customers, if you've done some pilot and all of that. And then also they look at your team. Does your team have what it takes to execute the project or the startup to give the type of result that you want? So these are some of the reasons why what it means when investors tells you that your business is not investable. Now, investors don't fund ideas, they fund evidence of execution. So, strengthen your pitch deck in such a way that you have traction, you have finance before approaching equity. It is very, very important. So, another question I have here is debt financing realistic for early stage startups in Africa? Is debt financing realistic for early stage startups in Africa? Okay. Now, most early stage startups can't access debt because banks want collateral and cash flow proof. However, there are some exceptions that exist. Microfinance loans for very small ventures. There are some microfinance that give small businesses for small businesses loans. And there is also venture debt that we've talked about earlier in equity, the venture debt for startups already with equity backing. So there's venture debt. Some investor can want to, they might take an equity, and also they might also give you a loan. So that is called venture debt. So another aspect of doing this is through government or donor-backed SME loans with softer requirements. So government loans usually have little or no collateral. So we have in Nigeria, we have Smendan, we have a lot of initiatives that the government is trying to do to give loans for SMEs and nano businesses. So if you are pre-revenue, don't force debt, right? It can kill your startup. It will give you headache. It will come for you. Wait until your cash flow is predictable. Yes, predictable. Okay. Another question here is okay. So what percentage of equity should I give away at seed stage? Okay, percentage of equity. There's no fixed rule. There's no fixed rule that should give so percentage of that percentage. It depends on you. But generally, aim to raise enough capital for 12 to 18 months. 18 months of 12 to 18 months of runway. Runway means the amount of money you need to run the business, for 18 months to run the business, to do what you have to do, development, payment of staff, blah, 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 some bills to pay, research and development, at least raise money that will at least take you up to 18 months. And then other thing you should note is that give away 10 to 25% equity at seed stage. maximum 25% at seed stage, and avoid crossing 50% dilution too early, or you lose control of the business completely. So at the early stage, if you are giving 51%, you are left with 49, and before you know, the business will be yours again. So these are some of the things I just want you to know. So founders often regret giving away too much early. Yes, giving away too much of the equity early. So always balance immediate funding needs with long-term ownership. Okay. Another question here is: are grants only for social enterprises, or can profit-making startups apply too? Now, grants often target social impact sectors like education, like agriculture, climate, health. However, for-profit startups are eligible if they align with donor goals. Some particular grants will be specific for startups that are profit oriented, right? So, example, a for-profit solar startup may get a climate resilience grant because its work aligns with the sustainable development goals. Yes. So always check donor requirement, their criteria. So you can run a profit making business and still access grants if your work drives impact. Oh yes. Now okay, still have some few questions to go. Okay. Okay, the question here is: what is the biggest mistake funders make when approaching funders? What is the biggest mistake founders of startups make when they are approaching donors or funders? One of the biggest mistake is on this is on the aspect of one size fits all pitch. You see, most funders approach funders thinking that one size fits all. They use the same pitch deck for debt, for grant, and for equity. Like everything is the same for them, but the thinking regarding all of these are very, very different from each other. Like very, very different. A lot different. And one other mistake they made is over promising numbers that can't be justified. If you are promising an investor that you're going to give them 100x and they look at all the indicators that you can deliver that result and they are not seeing it, that is over promising. Another one is saving money without clarity on how it aligns with their business stage. So if you are looking for money and you are not clear on how that money aligns with your business, or you are saving it without having a clear understanding of what you are doing, of your business model, of some of those things. So those are the mistakes. So always and always tailor your approach. So grants want impact. That is one thing you should note. Grant wants impact. You want to show impact. Now VCs, that is equity. They want scale. That hey, you want to grow. You want to give us 10x. And then banks want stability. Banks want stability. So, okay, lastly, the last question here is where can I consistently find live funding opportunities as an Africa funder? Okay, I think I've been able to put all of the questions in one so that this session will not be too long. So that is exactly why we built GrantsDatabase.org. So the question is asking, how can I consistently find live funding opportunities as an Africa funder? So we built GrantsDatabase.org to give funders a one platform to track grants, competitions, and funding calls in real time, like real time tracking. On a daily basis, we make grant applications across the globe, about 10, 20, 30 posts, to for on a daily basis, right? So instead of wasting hours, hunting online, shopping, you get a created, updated pipeline of opportunities that are relevant to your sector and stage on GrantsDatabase. Very, very relevant. So consistency in scanning opportunities is as important as readiness to apply. So this is one of the main reasons why we built GrantsDatabase, so that you can be able to use the platform and then can be able to make effective use of it. So let's recap today's key lessons as we are coming to the conclusion of this webinar. Number one, we've talked about several things. Don't chase funding blindly. That is why we are having this session, so that you will not be chasing funding blindly. What type of funding do you need? And what do you need? How we go about it? We've answered all of these things in this session, in this webinar. So choose the right path based on your startup. You have to choose the right funding path based on your startup and business model, based on your startup stage and business, based on your stage and business model. You can't be in an idea stage and you want to raise, you want to raise money as equity. So it doesn't really work. You have to build the traction first to attract investors. So next month, we continue the Investment Readiness Accelerator series with another topic that will be announced next month. Yeah, to be announced next month. So we want you to stay connected with us. Follow GrantsDatabase for funding alerts. GrantsDatabase.org for funding alerts. You can subscribe to the email. You can subscribe to the email and get join the WhatsApp community. You get it on your WhatsApp, on your mail. So you can also book advisory sessions with Oluwole Consult if you need deeper support with your grants or you want to understand more on equity and what we've talked about. So also, I want you to share this session with fellow founders like yourself. It might be the clarity that they need to get some of the things straight. So thank you so much for joining and see you at the next session. Let's keep building fundable African startups together. Thank you.